See, we are in the business of building narratives. So I've had a close view to this for many years, and I've also worked with women leaders. And in the early years, when we used to do these stories, there was always this question of when we are trying to build a profile for successful women business leaders, there's always the question of, okay, there's so much focus on how they do family work life balance, where the narratives need to talk a little more about women at the workplace for what they are at the workplace, right? The skill sets that they bring, both the hardcore skill sets that's required in a particular sector, as well as the soft skills that is required to for your role and for the organization and as a business leader. That element somehow is still missing. And what happens when we keep building false narratives over a period of time?
Hi, and thank you for giving your time to Unlimited Seating. I'm your host, Sanila Samuel. Every episode, we bring to you a role model who shares her journey in an easy-flowing, candid conversation. We talk about early childhood influences, career choices, and how they've navigated through biases and life in general to get to where they are at today. Through these conversations, Unlimited Seating aims to inspire, educate, and build a community that promotes and celebrates inclusion and diversity in a world where female leaders are still an exception and not the norm. Thank you for staying with us for another episode of Unlimited Seating. Unlimited Seating is available on all major podcast directories, and you can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Please do share your feedback. Alternatively, you can subscribe to us at www.unlimitedseating.com and get notified when new episodes are published. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Unlimited Seating. I'm very excited to introduce my guest for today, Sumathi Chari. Sumathi is a brand and integrated communication specialist with close to 2 decades of experience. Sumathi is based out of Bangalore, India. She's a strong advocate of hiring and growing women in the workplace. Sumathi, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you, Sanila. It's a pleasure for me to be on Unlimited Seating. I've been following your work and listening to stories of some very inspiring women, and kudos to you. It's a great effort, and I'm happy to be part of the series.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sumathi. Thanks for listening. And it's because of role models like you that Unlimited Seating is going strong. So thanks a lot. What I'm really excited about is that we are schoolmates, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about what you've been through since we were at school. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start with this, Sumathi. So we kind of probably haven't spoken for a few decades now. After school, obviously, we went different routes. You are on a very exciting career path, right? You are in PR, branding, and communications. So leaving school, how did that come about? Was it something that you knew you wanted to do? Because I know the school we were in, we were either taught to be engineers or doctors. So I am really curious to see how you hit upon this career path.
Actually, you started on the right note. So you're right. We were in a school where most of us were expected to become the brightest and the biggest in established streams like, or what is perceived as established streams like medicine and engineering. So yes, grew up amidst a lot of students and who were aspiring to become engineers and doctors and so on. But this might surprise you. I think my first early wishes and dreams of being in what would then be called the advertising fraternity started right from grade 8. And thanks, that appreciation should actually go to my mom. She made the inroads from a very different background. She was a commerce graduate, but somewhere as she started working, it took her into the ad industry, and she was working in an advertising agency. So I grew up amidst a lot of magazines to read at home and got exposure into being part of some large events that were organized by her workplace, such as just simple things like the quiz that would happen. And then she was working at an agency called MA, and they would have an annual, which was one of the leading ad agencies at that time. They would have an annual lecture called the IRSP lecture. So got to listen to some great brand and advertising minds from an early age, like and a couple of others. And that's where the initial interest was really seeded in my head. I always thought I would become a brand consultant and imagine myself to be like a client servicing person.
Nice.
Yes, but as I came in and completed my grade 10, I got a high percentile in the science and math stream, as much as I was not good at it, just for the 10th boards. And then
I always thought you were a top student, by the way. So surprised when you told me the other day you don't like some subjects.
Not really. I had to like literally slog it out to ensure that I get good grades in subjects like math and science, especially because they were not really my cup of tea. I think that understanding or was there early. But when I finally managed to score a 97 in grade 10, my parents were now sure, and I got an admission into 11th grade in our school, which was very difficult at those times, NPS Bangalore. So they were like very sure now I had to do medicine or engineering because the scores just supported that.
Mm.
And then I had to have a bit of a work at home to say that I do not want to pursue science. They were so disillusioned with me, like most Indian families, but specifically South Indian families would be. So, and my real love was actually something like BA in journalism and psychology. I think I was made for that and I would have done great. But like many other young adults at that time, I felt it was not good for me to further disillusion my parents.
Yeah.
So they coaxed me into taking up commerce, or I decided myself also that I would do commerce. They, of course, wanted me to do, they thought, okay, this is the next best bet. I would do my, or become a banker. Which was second to engineering and medicine. But I think throughout, I kind of knew that this is the field I wanted to be in. I started working soon after my graduation as I was to give my entrance exams for MBA. So I decided to take a year's break and start working. And at that time, PR in India was extremely nascent. In fact, even I didn't know what it was. I always knew what advertising was. I didn't really know what PR was. But as luck would have it, I just joined a small firm, which is the current one that I am working in, right? At that point of time, it was started as an entrepreneurial venture. So I decided to get my hands dirty and learn a little about the work there. But that was a great start and a great experience, and that's where the journey started.
How did that work out for you? So commerce and then joining this, how did your family take that? Did they not ask you like, hey, you've just completed commerce, why are you jumping field?
No. So like I said, when I completed my graduation, I was next to do my MBA. I was supposed to give my competitive exams for that. And in the meanwhile, I decided to start working. But when I started work, I think in some ways, when I used to come back home and share my experiences of what I'm doing at work, and my family took time to understand. I think somewhere they made out like I was fortunate to be working in an area that I'm actually passionate about and I love, which not many are fortunate to do.
Yeah.
So that kind of, and then as time progressed, again, joint work, and sometime during that time, I got married. So that was the second big milestone that happened after graduation. So I could not really pursue the post-graduation bit immediately. I moved to Delhi when I got married. So I continued working for some time there. And then, of course, by then I was allowed to take my individual decisions on what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Well, I'm in my 40s. I feel that even now, if I make a decision, there's like a lot of questions and judgments. So there's that level of comfort is still not there.
Yeah.
So what was it about you joined PRHUB, you said, right? What was the nature of work that you really excited you?
So basically, we work with organizations across sectors to help them with building, positioning, and building their brands and communicating to their stakeholders. In essence, that's what we do. The nature, what really excites me about this, as an agency, we work with clients across different sectors from technology, manufacturing and engineering, education, healthcare. One is the across sectors, and then with organizations of different sizes at different growth phases, right?
Got it. Mm.
Yeah. Now, needless to say, in today's world, I think brand building and building your reputation has become so much more important. There's recognition, and it's part of boardroom conversations. About 20 years back, it wasn't really so. PR was largely perceived to be media relations, getting editorial coverage in press.
Yeah.
So we were the facilitators for the same. I think that's how it was perceived then. But even as we did that, the fact that we had to build narratives, that we had to do storytelling, I think that's the part that excited me most, right? When you speak to entrepreneurs, when you speak to business leaders, you kind of understand why they are trying to build their brand, what is different about them.
Yeah.
And then you build interesting narratives and put it out in a manner that's credible. PR largely for the world outside, gradually changing. But again, at that point of time, it was always seen as, okay, you need to be good at relationship building and dining. The industry has realized in the last few years that we need to do a bit of PR for PR itself, because otherwise, yes, the larger perception has been that. But Not really so. It, like many other industries, it comes across that way when from an external point of view. But just to do all of this, there's a lot of studying, a lot of research, a lot of thinking, planning, writing content about different pieces, a lot of hard work that goes into it before you really see stories and you see brands being successful with their entire communication. So there is a lot of hard work that goes into it. It's a lot of thinking, and it's quite challenging, especially when you're on the agency side, because the only way you can do good work is when you go in depth, not only into the client organizations that you work with, but to understand who their stakeholders and their stakeholder minds and what would appeal to them. And therefore, how is it that you really build the narrative? It's something that's complex when you keep doing it across multiple organizations.
And can I ask you this, Sumathi? So at the time when you started, right, like you said, PR was still fairly new in India at the time, right? Were there a lot of women working in the industry?
So again, stereotypes. Because PR was perceived as relationship building, you need to be able to speak to media, stories, and generally, like in hospitality, sometimes women are perceived to be better on these fronts. Yes, the industry did have a lot of women coming in at that time. I mean, whatever the small talent pool that it was, because it was still emerging. But yes, it was more of women. The second reason could also be because it was not seen as one of those high earning, high growth career streams at that point. So then, and there weren't really, like there are today, there weren't really too many specialized courses offered by institutes to get into PR. Today, there are masters and even graduate streams in mass communication or PR. At that point of time, I think it was MICA and probably one or two others that offered it. So mostly it would be people who do their graduation and masters in commerce or in literature, BA literature, who would come into the stream, because the basic skill set that's required was you needed to be good with your English and your content and both your oral and written. So to that extent, yes, there were a large number of, most of the talent pool at that point of time was women. It's gradually changing. There have been more men joining the stream in the last few years.
Okay. So you said you got married, you moved to Delhi, obviously up north in India, and you probably postponed your plans for post-graduation and did it a bit later. And did you keep working in PR itself when you moved location?
Yes. So I did join another agency there. It was a new place, and Delhi being a larger city and a bit of a hub for media. It was the largest media hub. So to that extent, it gave a very different experience. I was also working with one of the larger agencies when I moved to Delhi. So it was a very different, I think it exposed me to a different world, both culturally as well as because how it is in India, right? From the south to the north, there is a cultural difference. So yes, that gave me a very different learn working in a larger city and in a more competitive space, I would put it that way. With larger brands. I think those early years got to work with some very tough bosses.
And I know you had your first child as well, probably when you were in Delhi.
It was when I moved to Chennai at around the same time. I was in Delhi for about 3 to 3.5 years and then moved to Chennai down south again. So yes, at that point of time, I had PRHUB, my first baby.
And was that when as well you started your post-graduation that time?
I had completed it. I had taken a short break, and then so the PR industry and agency life requires long hours.
Yes, that's what I was I was going to come to that in a bit.
Yes, it's quite a bit of a stretch. So I couldn't really give time to my studies. So I decided to take a short break. I was still doing one thing I keep saying. Today, there's so much of talk about it. But in some sense, I never literally took a break where I was not doing anything. That's never happened. I don't know whether I could even do it today. I'm a little scared about it, but coincidentally, somehow it never happened, because at the time I took a break also and was focusing on studies. I think there was some support required, just working from home to get some media stories planted and all that. And I accepted that because it kept me engaged and it kept me in touch with the work, which you never see it as work when you really like what you're doing, as I worked in all those years. So you just took up work and you just kept doing it, and something came out of it. On hindsight, I think it's a great thing because it connects the dots and then it leads you to somewhere.
Yeah. Like you said, you never really took a break, right? I'm going back to the last time when we talked a couple of weeks back. I think both of us have had this experience, right? I feel definitely for me, it happens a lot. Maybe I think things have changed, but I still have this feeling that in India, as a young girl, your parents do want to educate you. They want you to get the best of education, but there's always that understanding that at the end of the day, you need to get married, right? That is your first priority and your first goal. You need to get married, you need to make your home, you need to have kids, you need to fulfill all of those duties. That's kind of the top on the priority list. And then here you're saying that you never like really taken a break. You got married, you then did your post-graduation. What drove you and how supportive was family and how important was the role of family then?
So you spoke about marriage. So yes, like I told you, I think a year or so after graduation, I got married. So yes, especially the community that I come from, like it's conventional way of thinking. There is a marriageable age.
Yeah.
So, and it's better for us to get married then. So that did happen. On like again on hindsight, I don't know, all things, there are pros and cons. There's good and bad. So it's good in a way, because it probably allowed me to do a lot more in the later years and now. So I think there's always some sense to everything and some rationale to everything that happens. So there's no regret about it. Having said, yes, marriage becomes a factor, and then needless to say, maternity becomes a factor, right?
Yeah.
The only reason, yes, I've had a very supportive family, both on my parental side as well as my in-laws. I think there was always the understanding that I had to be a working woman. I've had a support system back home to enable me do that and say this. And I understand, having worked with so many women in so many years, how challenging it could be if you do not have a support system, or if you're not able to build a strong one, which is not sometimes easy in India, right? Or anywhere, because I have my sister living in the US, and I know it's not easy anywhere, right? So to that extent, yes, I had a lot of family support. Having said that, I need to say that then what happens is you still don't let go of what your duties otherwise are back home.
Yeah.
So in typical fashion, like many other women do, I've done a stretch on multiple accounts to make that work for me, right? To make the working side that I'm able to continue working, even despite having the support of the family. I ensured that, for example, I would get up to finish all that I could at home and keep everything ready and in place, and then get to work. And I would do a similar thing when I come back home at night. So there was always that pressure of trying to live up to your roles and responsibilities and duties back home also, and not compromising on that. So it wasn't easy to that extent, right? You really need to work hard to pull it off. And like I said, especially in an industry like ours, because it's not like a 9 to 5 and you do again because you are passionate, you are ambitious, you want to grow. So, and I say this today to women sometimes too, you can't have the cake too. As you grow into leadership roles in organizations, the organization does require a lot more of you as well. And if you're not in it, then there are compromises that you make on both fronts, right? So I've done that. There are compromises I've made during the growth journey on both the personal front as well as on the career front.
Right. Were there times when you thought that this is like I'm now having to choose between one or the other?
No, there was never a time when I thought I had to choose one or the other. Never a time. I think that clarity I had in my mind that I always wanted to do both of this.
Yeah.
So, and that's the reason probably I would stretch and do it a lot more easily. There's one thing that I want to say, right? Because we often think, okay, when you get married, you have a family, and then it's better to be a double income family. And that's why both need to work. So keeping the financial bit of it aside, needless to say, a double income family is great and you contribute to the family and you're financially independent, all of that. But over the years, there is a reiteration. I knew I wanted to continue working. So I used to keep thinking, is there something wrong with me or a little bit of my maternal instincts? But over the years now, I mean, because I also play an HR role in the organization and I meet so many women and I talk to them, this is the myth, right? That women are sacrificing or they are trying to work just to support their families. There are a growing number of women, Sunny, who want to be working because they want to be working for themselves. It's their identity. They want to be doing something, keeping aside all other factors.
Absolutely. And I think that, like you said, I think when we started working, there was no concept of the work from home or like remote working and like able to have the calls that we're having right now. But with all the technology available today, we should be so consciously trying to get women to be able to work, right? If they want to take care of the little one as well as work, why not? How do we enable that even more?
Yeah, I'll tell you another interesting data and I'll come back to answer your question. I know there is a growing requirement and probably the recognition that some of the work that we do is possible out of home. And if that makes life more convenient, why not?
Yeah.
Right? That's the logic. And I think the pandemic has kind of people wake up to this fact, both organizations as well as individuals. Having said that, I also meet a number of women who do not want to necessarily work out of home and who talk about the challenges of working from home. Again, it's all very individual and it may not be completely gender based also. And I think we need to study a little more deeper rather than just thinking that women always want work from home or flexible. Yeah, because I also do meet women who say, no, it's okay. Let me have fewer, but let me come to work. And even those who are choosing to work out of home sometimes say, no, twice or thrice I'll come. Simply because social interaction is a very different thing as individuals. And especially for mothers who try to work out of home, it's not an easy task. In fact, I'm like totally in awe of these young mothers who try to work out of home and also take care of the children, because our work requires a lot of concentration, calls. So it's not easy sometimes to build that routine unless you're extremely disciplined, extremely mature about it. And again, you have a support system back there when you're at work, even if you're working at home. So yeah, there could be few people who look at flexibility, but there might be, I think the bigger challenges, which is again not gender based, like in a city like Bangalore today, and it's not about women, it's about your kind of time that you spend on commute and the stress that gives you. More than if you were to be able to easily get to work, meet a few people, do a few meetings, I'm sure more people would love doing that also. It's just the challenges of all other factors that make people say, no, let me just avoid all this and be work from home.
I like what you said. Like, right, we need real flexibility in terms of it varies by person. So I think the flexibility, like you said, it's a good point. It's not flexibility just saying that, okay, you can work from home or work from office from 9 to 2 or something. It's flexibility to adapt to each individual, right? And to their needs and to their like personal situation as well.
Absolutely. So that's what we are doing today when we are trying to kind of revise and look at some of our models of working with different people. I think fortunately we are in a space where we are an agency. So we're still keeping it largely individual driven. There are people who come in twice or thrice a week and then work out of home the remaining days. And then even the work from home, some people decide to do it the actual working hours, while a few others decide to do it at breaks that is convenient to them. I think that is the flexibility that's required for each individual versus trying to standardize it and
standardize the flexibility.
Yeah, because then that is again not going to really serve a purpose.
That's a really good point. Having these conversations is really important. I think with COVID, we're having more of these, like, what is your situation at home? What would work well for you? I think we're now open to having those conversations. I remember the last time we talked, you made this great point about the narrative, right? And you said that I think we've grown up seeing the very successful business leader who got it all. Boss lady at work, kids are flourishing, and you're like, oh my God, I need to be superwoman. Right. So tell me a little bit about it, because I really like the way you talked about it.
Yeah. See, we are in the business of building narratives. So I've had a close view to this for many years, and I've also worked with women leaders. And in the early years, when we used to do these stories, there was always this question of when we are trying to build a profile for successful women business leaders, there's always the question of, okay, there's so much focus on how they do family work-life balance. And if you see those stories, the narratives over the years have been built that way. You go to the biggest of business leaders and women business leaders, there's always that question of how do you work things out back at home and how do you manage as a mother, and this over celebration of motherhood, right? Now, I don't mean to be, this is a topic that I want to be careful about, because narratives, like the stereotypical narratives, right? I think we need to shift. I can tell you, despite being a mother to two, and I have worked late into the nights at times when a project demanded. There are times when I have gone home midnight and post midnight. And I know in streams like ours, events, journalism, where the work demands sometimes that kind of, I see so many women doing that, right? But it's often perceived that men are preferred for these roles because it might require this. There are so many women in certain streams who are able to do a stretch like this, or who are as competitive and good with their skill sets for the role in the workplace. I think those are the places where the narratives need to talk a little more about women at the workplace for what they are at the workplace, right? The skill sets that they bring, both the hardcore skill sets that's required in a particular sector, as well as the soft skills that is required for your role and for the organization and as a business leader. I think that element somehow is still missing. And what happens when we keep building false narratives over a period of time? That becomes the truth. What is media at the end of the day? When you're putting out stories, when you're talking about yourself, there are thousands who are reading, and young women who gain inspiration from that. And throughout, you kind of then reimpose that you need to be someone who's doing a great job at this as well as this. The stereotypes of women being great multitaskers, women being able to do a perfect work-life balance, and this is our image of successful women, right? Now, what if you were not a great multitasker, but you could still be? And what makes it worse is that you do not have similar narratives when it comes to your male counterparts. So, for example, when you are talking about the biggest business leaders, you are talking about them only on the work front and what they have done to an organization and how much they have grown revenues to, and what is their style of leadership. I think the narrative should be similar for women. If you are not, and if you're taking a different route there, then you're superimposing what is already built over the years.
I think that's a great point that you're making. And I've seen this a lot. I've been in a lot of sessions where there's women leader and somebody always asks the question about, oh, how do you do work-life balance? But it's never really asked to a male. You just assume that his work-life balance is getting taken care of. That's just the assumption that, oh, you're not there because you're either working long hours in the office and you're driving results and you're leading your team and somebody else is taking care of the kids for you. But the question is always asked to women. And I think we also don't realize how much stress that can put on you, right? If you're thinking, oh my God, I have to be this great multitasker because that's what is expected of me. So I have to do all of this and I have to do it really well. We're putting so much stress on ourselves. So I used to do that till a few years back, and then I realized how stupid that is.
Absolutely. It's the same with me. I spent years struggling to be this multitasker everywhere until I, at some point of time, said, this is not going to be practical. That pressure wasn't there all the time on you. You would probably lead your life slightly different.
Relaxed, yes.
Not trying to be perfect everywhere. And like you said, sometimes trying to please. I always say one thing, being in PR, another big learning and lesson this industry teaches you, and more so in a social media and digital world like today, that you always run this risk of living your image. When you keep building a certain image for yourself, if that's not who you really are, then you run the risk of living that image, right? So
true.
Yeah,
I really like that, how you're correlating your industry to how we need to be thinking about it personally as well, right? Because what are you trying to project or show, and is that the real story?
Yeah, because I'll tell you what, we work with organizations. So in PR, there's always this 10 or 15%, the need to spin and elevate a brand versus what they are, right? So I've also been fortunate to work with a number of entrepreneurs and business leaders. Now, especially in the entrepreneur space, right? You realize that after a point of time, you need to know where you still are and where you're trying to grow, versus the PR that we end up doing for them, because the PR is always, like I said, that elevation. But if growth is not happening on the ground, or if you're not focused on building an organization versus the image, it still does not help. Somewhere it falls apart, and you can see that happening all around us today with so many organizations, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the story has gone much further ahead.
Yeah.
Got it. So you said that you're also kind of taking on that HR role in your organization based on your wealth of experience, right? Kind of growing up in this space. And now you started at PRHUB, now you're a senior leader at the organization. What do you think are some of the things that you did personally which helped you with growth? Because obviously, like you said, you started out of college, now you are leading a good portion of the organization. What helped you with that growth?
Yeah. So I'll again talk from my personal perspective when I answer this. I think one of the things that really helps, and this could be something that women could keep in mind, right? You have got to kind of take that call on what will work for you, right? Despite what's happening all around you, you've got to take that call on what will work for you. For me, growth was very important. The biggest question, the immediate question that most people ask me is, what really made you stick to one organization for so long? Right. So when I answer your question, I'll answer a little bit of that, because I never planned my career in a sense. I didn't say 5 years from now I need to be here by. I think it was always taking it one step at a time. I knew I wanted to be growing. I knew I wanted to be adding up to my skill sets. I wanted to be honing it further. This was always the focus as I grew in the last few years. So that just meant, for example, when I went through my maternity, I went back and said I might not be able to lead client-facing roles right now because they're a lot more demanding, and that might not make sense because I might not do justice to my role. Not because I wanted to. I would have, knowing me, I would have probably still broken my head and handled it. I just said it may not do justice to the organization. I was fortunate to be in a growing organization. And I was fortunate to have worked with the owner and head who, again, provided at various stages the freedom and the space for me to come and take up these roles, right? So I took on an HR role way back in 2009 and then set up an HR team. And I want to say this, I think taking up that role gave me a very different perspective along these years on. So in some sense, I've been like a quasi-entrepreneur today because besides being in the PR industry and honing my skills on the job there, being in a growing organization and being there throughout has also meant I've in some ways strategized and worked on the growth of the organization and on fixing the internal challenges, much like an entrepreneur would do, right? And I continue to do that. So working in an HR role also gives a very different perspective because acting more with people, people is like our biggest asset, right? Because services business. So all that we deliver to clients is with people. And like many other industries, it's also the biggest challenge the industry faces.
Yeah.
So, which means as I have interacted with more and more people over the years, it's given a very different perspective from a leadership role perspective, right? You're not only looking at skill sets and how to grow it, and you build teams, and then what's the kind of mix, and how do you really build culture? There are so many of these things, and I mean, post-pandemic, it's a new challenge thrown at all of us, right? And we have a lot of Gen Z and millennials with a senior. So there's a lot of, for example, reverse mentoring and reverse learning that we need to do. The industry is in a growing space. The communication and media landscape is one of the fastest changing and most dynamic globally. And then the entire talent people perspective, like I just listened to this somewhere last week. When we grew up and joined the work stream, we kind of joined organizations and we were talking about a standard of living. But today there is a growing awareness of not standard of living necessarily, but quality of living and quality of life. So how are organizations going to add to this? Is it possible as you grow businesses? There's so much to think about and so much to do. So that's challenging and that's nice that you're able to do it in your own sphere.
Yeah. So what I'm getting from your story, right? You obviously you've grown, and what I'm hearing is there were times when you were focused on growing, but you made choices and decisions based on where you were personally as well, right? Kind of taking the right role at a time when you didn't want to do that. But what I'm also getting is that you're very adaptable, right? You come across as very flexible, very adaptable, and you're keeping on learning. You're learning about the team, you're learning about new people who are coming into the business. What do they want? What's important to them?
More than ever before, we all know that learning is a constant today, right? Otherwise, I mean, in some sense, yes, you did follow it. But today, if any of us try to live in this castle saying we are experienced, before we know it all, I think that will be the first step to the fall down, because the only thing you need to ask is it, are you enjoying it? Are you able to continue to learn? Are you able to continue to grow? And then there's no right and wrong, right? I've always taken it one step at a time. So you do what you are comfortable and you like doing at each point of phase. So,
absolutely. I know I asked you about role models, when you said your mom was the person you got interested in advertising because of her. And I know you said that she kept working. I was thinking about if I were to ask your son and daughter, I'm sure they would say it's you.
I hope so, but I'm not too sure the next generation would really say that. See, all I know is one thing: when I had a working mom and both parents working, right, it does build in you an early sense of independence and responsibility taking, which has definitely helped me over the years as well. Right. So because you're used to staying alone and you're used not to expect certain things all the time from your mother or them being around you all the time to give you what they want. So when I do this sometimes, and I would be lying if I don't say there are days when, not so much now, but definitely a few years back when they were younger. Now they're growing to an age where they don't necessarily want me around all the time. It's a different story, but they are younger years, right? I have spent times and days introspecting a little on whether I'm not giving them my time and presence. But I just probably used to console myself saying, let it happen. Because I know one thing, right? That if I were to take away from my work identity and try to be a homemaker, which I believe is one of the most difficult jobs. Believe me, actually, homemaker is one of the most difficult jobs. I felt I was not best suited for that, and I would be more miserable.
Yeah.
So I just felt it's better, even if it was the little time that I spend with them, it's better being there and being myself and being happy. That's the best I can say at this point. I don't know, role model would be a very big word to use, but yeah.
So what's the next for you, Sumathi? Say 5 years from now, what are you thinking about career-wise?
Okay, I just told you I don't plan. So a few years back, I was anointed as the director in the company, combination of both the roles that I was taking up as well as the long stay and all of that. And I am in a place where today it requires a lot of strategic decisions and planning for our growth and moving forward. So that's something that I'm hoping to put my best foot forward to do. And the other thing that has been on my mind, and I have been making efforts, is about women at the workplace and this entire narratives of women. It's something that I'm quite an advocate of, and I want to be doing something more. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I wish you all the best with your future endeavors and what you want to do. I want to say this, like I said, we were, I think, in a few different classes together over the years we were at school. And you were always, like, for me, if I think of you back in school, it was always somebody who was very positive, always cheerful. Like, that's kind of my memory of you in school. And I can see that the optimism and the positivity and the good energy hasn't left you. And I feel that that's because you're continuing to do what you love every day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sanila.
Thanks so much for sharing your story with us at Unlimited Seating today.
Thank you for thinking of having me as a part of your series. And I'm totally looking forward to you doing more and more of this and listening to all the conversations that you're doing. It's a great job that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sumathi.